Hello everyone. Welcome to Engage Cleveland's 8th annual Cleveland Young Professionals Week. My name is David Toth and I am Vice Chair of Engage Cleveland's Board of Directors. Engage Cleveland is a community engagement organization for young professionals and business community leaders who are passionate about making Cleveland a lasting home for the next generation. Our goal is to attract, engage, and retain young, diverse talent to Greater Cleveland by connecting young professionals to people, jobs, organizations, and events. Cleveland YP Week is our signature event, and I would like to thank all of our sponsors and partners for their dedication to the young professional community. In particular, I'd like to thank our gold sponsor, Key Bank, our silver sponsor, Case Western Reserve University and Odie Corporation, the bronze sponsors, Benish, Code 3, Fifth Third Bank, Jumpstart, RPM, and the NRP Group. Our community sponsors, the Carnegie Companies, Cleveland Cavaliers, Cuyahoga Community College, Lincoln Electric, National Interstate Insurance, and Staffing Solution Enterprises. Additionally, I want to thank the Cleveland Metropolitan Conference Center for hosting this event today, along with Hennes Communication and Winding River Consulting for supporting the live stream. I also want to thank all of you for participating in today's event. We encourage you to follow us on social media and post pictures and quotes from all of our Cleveland YP Week events by using the hashtag CLEYPWeek and by tagging Engage Cleveland. Now, I would like to turn it over to our president of Engage Cleveland, Ashley Oken, to spend a few minutes introducing our candidates.
Thank you, David. Justin Bibb studied urban policy and has dedicated his career to building more just and equitable cities. He earned his BA in Urban Studies from American University and got a scholarship to study abroad for a year at the London School of Economics. He later returned to Cleveland to undertake his JD and MBA from Case Western Reserve University. Over the last 15 years, Justin has held positions in local government, business, and the philanthropic sector as an organizer, executive, and nonprofit leader. Currently, Justin works with mayors, business leaders, and community organizations across the country as the Chief Strategy Officer of Urbanova, an innovative startup that leads new initiatives to make cities safer, healthier, and more resilient. Kevin Kelley's career of service to Cleveland began when he was a social worker and witnessed the power advocacy had to help individuals. Kevin earned a bachelor's degree in economics from Marquette University and a master's degree in social work from Case Western Reserve University. He graduated magna cum laude from Cleveland Marshall College of Law. In 2005, Kevin was elected to Cleveland City Council to represent Ward 13, including Old Brooklyn and parts of the Stockyard neighborhood. In 2014, he was elected by his colleagues to serve as president of council. He is chair of the council's Finance Committee and Rules Committee, while also serving on 2 additional committees, Operations and Mayor's Appointments. He is currently a practicing lawyer in Cleveland. Now I would like to introduce our moderator, Mark Naymik. Mark joined WKYC Studios as a reporter in July of 2019. He was born and raised in Northeast Ohio, where he has spent more than 20 years covering the region's politics, institutions, and characters. A graduate of the University of Dayton, he started his journalism career working for alternative weeklies in Cleveland and Philadelphia before joining the Plain Dealer in 2000. In 2013, he became a columnist for Cleveland.com, where he also produced web-friendly stories and videos. I will now turn it over to Mark to begin. Thank you all for joining us.
Hey, thank you very much, and I appreciate the long intro. It should never be longer than the candidates, so I'll take it. And I appreciate your attention for people tuning in and those in the live audience. As someone who's covered the region for 20 plus years, nothing's more important to the region than who leads the city of Cleveland. Congratulations to both Kevin and Justin on their primary wins. A lot of people don't realize how competitive this race was, both in money, serious campaigns, and trying to get attention. We haven't seen a race this competitive in 20 years, since 2001, when there were, I think, 9 or 11 candidates running that year. There were many big names in that, and in that primary, we saw Jane Campbell, who would go on to become the city's first mayor, female mayor, and Raymond Pierce, who was considered the outsider at the time, come through and place second. So it's been a long time since we've had a race this close, and for those that are keeping count, this will be the first time we have a new mayor in the City Hall, 601 Lakeside, in 16 years. So thank you again for joining us for this friendly forum. I'm going to ask candidates the same questions. A lot of these are based on Engage Cleveland's issues and interests and some surveys that they've based that on. Both candidates, again, will have a chance to answer everything. But more importantly, we want to hear from the audience, those that are here and those that are watching on a live stream. If you have questions, get them into by tweeting at Engage Cleveland, all one word, and use the hashtag CLE Town Hall. So let's just jump right in. This is an order set by Engage Cleveland. We'll start with Justin. 2 to 3 at the most, top priorities when you enter City Hall, if elected, and what would you do immediately to address it?
Well, number one, public safety. Many of our residents are living in fear all across the city. We're approaching, I believe, over 127 homicides already this year. Shootings are up about 21%. And as mayor, I want to make sure we do a better job of redeploying our officers on the beat. I want 70% of our officers walking the beat, 30% assigned to specialized units. Secondly, I believe in order to keep our community safe and secure, we need to truly address the root cause of violent crime. So I want to add a 4th option to 911 around mental health, and finally embrace real police accountability in the city of Cleveland. The other second big priority is having a modern and responsive City Hall. As we do everything we can to claw our way out of this pandemic, we have to make sure we're getting resources to our neighborhoods so that we can have an inclusive comeback moving forward in our city.
All right, thank you for 2. CV 2, Kevin, priorities and how do you address them?
Thank you, Mark. Crime and safety is, of course, our #1 issue in the city of Cleveland, in every neighborhood, north and south, east and west. And when you read the headlines when a 12-year-old gets shot, I am a father of a 12-year-old, and all too often we start putting this into statistics and it becomes crime is up or down. We need to really understand these are families, these are people that have lost lives, whose lives have been torn. And that's why crime and safety has to be our absolute #1 issue. We need to make sure that we are doing 3 things with the Division of Police. We need to make sure, first of all, that we're recruiting and training and retaining the officers we have. We need to give the tools, the support that they need to succeed. Second, community policing has to be something that is not just a word. It can't be something that's got a different definition. It's got to have a common definition. Since I've been councilperson in the 2nd District, we've been doing community policing before it was a thing. On every Thursday afternoon in summers, I would do foot patrols and bike patrols with the men and women of the 2nd District. It is so important to actually talk to people and not just rely on calls for service. But that is important because we have to build trust between the Division of Police and our citizens. We have to make sure that people, it breaks my heart when we're doing foot patrol, bike patrols, and a resident will tell me that something that went on, but they didn't call the police because they just thought they were too busy or they wouldn't respond. We need to make sure that there's absolute confidence between our citizens and the Division of Police. We need to make sure that there is a true community relations committee like we have in the 2nd District, where we meet with the command staff of the 2nd District every month. We need to make sure that there's an active functioning community service unit, which is off-radio a division that responds to quality of life issues. Whether it's noise, whether it's neighbor disputes, you have to stop those before they escalate. But it's not functioning in every district equally. We need to make sure that that is happening. And finally, we need to make sure that we are addressing the root cause of crime, of poverty, of hopelessness, of disinvestment. So safety is one. The second one is access to opportunity. We have a problem in this community of making sure our citizens have access to all the opportunity that's available. We live in a community where there are thousands of open, available, high-paying jobs, but yet our citizens do not have the education and training to take them. To me, that is a fundamental instability of our economy. We need to make sure we deal with that. We need to make sure that we ensure access to opportunity through broadband access. The census is wrong about a lot of things, but we are the least connected city. There is a plan. We just authorized dollars to put forth broadband to every citizen, or 40,000 citizens of our city. We have to stop talking about these things and do them.
Thank you, Kevin. And that leads us a little bit into that next question. Engage Cleveland surveyed its professionals. They say 41% say that the lack of job opportunities is the biggest factor for them in deciding whether to come to Cleveland. I think obviously we got to broaden that question out to how we provide those opportunities for people, both the young professional and those in Cleveland. So Justin, why don't you kind of jump in on what you would do to address that? What are those strategies to deal with employment rates across all sectors?
Yeah, well, I think we got to start by investing in the next generation of our workforce. Right now in Cuyahoga County, we have a youth unemployment crisis that is costing us about $1 billion of lost economic productivity. And that's why, as mayor, I want to make sure we're exposing every child inside our school district, particularly in middle school, about what career pathways exist, and encourage every junior and senior inside of a CMSD high school to have a year-round apprenticeship or internship, making at least $15 an hour so they can have a pathway to a high-paying, middle-class job when they graduate from Cleveland Public High School. Because college is not for everybody, and that's okay. And what we learned during this pandemic is that the future of work is changing, and K through 12 education must be better connected to our workforce development ecosystem long term. Secondly, I would say this, and I've had this conversation with many CEOs in Cleveland, but also CEOs who may want to invest in Cleveland in the future. The biggest complaint they have is they don't know who to call when they want to invest in Cleveland. And as I like to say, we have a lot of good musicians playing their own sheet music, but no conductor. So the next mayor must work proactively with our county executive to have a unified approach to how we have a regional economic development strategy, so we have a clear value proposition to attract and retain businesses in Northeast Ohio. And having a city hall that is easy to do business with is critical. I've talked to a number of small business owners that say that they couldn't get a call return from City Hall, so they went to Stowe or Hudson or Bay Village to grow their business, not in Cleveland. So my job as mayor is to create the right conditions for good quality job creation, and that's going to be my focus if elected come November 2nd.
Kevin, I want to give you a chance to address that Engage Cleveland survey result of 41% young professionals say possibilities of not having jobs is something that concerns them. How would you address that from those specifically, that group?
Absolutely. So people choose where they're going to live and stay based on job availability. That is what people need.
And sports teams.
And sports teams, of course. But we have to really look at, if we're going to grow our economy, we really have to look at the fundamental instability of our economy, which is that whether it's healthcare, whether it's skilled manufacturing, whether it's information services, financial services, we have thousands of open, available, high-paying careers where you can put food on your table, purchase a home, buy 2 cars, and put your kids through college, but our citizens are not skilled and educated to take those positions. Now I've been working with the CMSD, I'm on the Career Pathways Advisory Committee, and we have to stop talking about career in 11th or 12th grade. We need to start talking about it in 5th and 6th grade. We need to make sure that our young scholars have hope, because right now there's a lack of hope that this economy is going to be there for them. When I talk to senior classes and I ask people who is familiar with Say Yes to Education, and in a room of 25, 30 people, I see 3 to 5 hands go up, that breaks my heart, because there is opportunity right now. We are one of 4 cities across the nation, and we're the only city in Ohio that if you graduate from a CMSD school, you can have your college education paid for. It could be a bachelor's degree, an associate's degree, an apprenticeship training. But we have to deal with this, and this idea that we live in a community that has this mismatch of available jobs, people that are unemployed and underemployed yearning for opportunity, but we can't bring them together. That has to be the most important, that will be job one for me as mayor. Because think about it like this, we can look at all the numbers, but just imagine you're at the food bank, or you've gone to somewhere to just put food on your table, and you're walking past help wanted signs. It is just, and you know that you can't get those jobs. It is just heartbreaking. Unemployment, poverty is stressful. It is harmful to families. We have to make sure that we are looking at this. But we are not going to build and bring additional businesses if those that are here can't expand. We're not going to remain the healthcare capital of the world if we can't find the doctors, the nurses' aides, the technicians. We're not going to remain the manufacturing hub that we are, contrary to what some people believe. Manufacturing is a strong part of our economy. But if we can't get people that can fill these jobs in skilled manufacturing, we're going to lose that. This is a critical, urgent issue that we need to deal with day one, and I intend to deal with it on day one.
Thank you, Kevin. All right, we're going to continue on. Now, this is going to feel like a hard right turn, but now I'm going to come back to Kevin so we can rotate who gets questions first. Two things we know about elections. Yard signs and young people don't vote. So young professionals are a key demographic here. What are you doing to engage them, and why is it important, Kevin?
Thank you. It's not just young professionals, it's young people in general that we've always struggled to bring to the polls. And what it is going to take, and the message that needs to be, the message that has to get out, is that this is your city. You are the future of this city. This city cannot thrive, this city cannot develop without young professionals, without young people determining their own fate, determining the fate of this great city. So we've reached out, we've had multiple small groups, we've had house parties, yard parties, just trying to get the message across that we need young professionals to engage. I have a daughter who is in the workforce, she's a young professional, and she tells me all the time the struggles that she has just talking to her friends. And the fact that most people, I think we had 16% participation in this last mayor's race, primary, and it might get, it's going to be better than that in the general. But just getting people to understand and believe that they are the future, that they determine the future of the city, it's a message that you have to just continue to deliver, and you can't give up. This is not the first campaign, this is not the first election where there has been a push to try to get young people to the polls. It's just very hard to do, and getting people to be engaged and really understand that message that yes, you are the future. It's a hard message.
And Justin, as the youngest candidate on the stage, your answer to the same question.
Yeah, this is personal for me. I'm 34 years old, and this is my first time running for office. And I hope by me entering this race for mayor, I've inspired other young people in the city and across this state to get a clipboard, get signatures, and get on the ballot if you feel like you can make a difference in your community. And I got my start in politics early. I realized I wasn't gonna be the next LeBron James in high school, so I volunteered on John Kerry's campaign for president as a junior. And it gave me an opportunity to go off to DC and go to American University and work with President Obama when he was in the US Senate. And I wanted to make sure when I ran for office one day that I got young people involved in my campaign. So we started an organization called Students for Bibb, which has nearly 100 students, high school students, college students, organizing and volunteering on our campaign. And it was that grassroots youth movement that propelled us to win last Tuesday. But I'll also say this, we gotta stop just trying to engage young people in the electoral process and make sure they're involved in the governing process. That's critical. If I'm blessed to become the next mayor, I wanna make sure we have dedicated fellowship programs and internship programs for young people to work in city government, because that's how you invest in the next generation in your community to finally build a city that can work for everybody, that truly prioritizes inclusion.
This next question, we're going to come back to Justin, but I'm going to frame it up a little bit different than what's on here. Engage Cleveland's State of Young Professional or Community report says 39% of respondents believe public transportation is one of Greater Cleveland's greatest challenges. But I think it's important to point out that, the public transportation in Cleveland, Greater Cleveland, is largely used by people that are not young professionals. And even for some context, when the Ernst & Young building was put down, and Kevin, you'll probably know this because this was part of legislation, in the flats, they got some special breaks because the idea was that they would help, encourage and have their professionals use that waterfront line, which is now closed. And by the way, Justin was a former board member of RTA, so they're both carrying the mantle here on this question. Let's talk about public transportation in
Yeah.
that context. It's for some, it's really needed for others. It's underfunded, even though we have one of the few public transportation systems that is funded with a dedicated stream from a sales tax. What do we need to do with public transportation to make it better for everyone?
Well, as you said in your comments, Mark, I think we have to change the narrative that public transit should be for everybody in our city. You know, I lived in other cities across the country and in the world, and I see how a city can thrive with good quality, affordable public transit. I myself have just gone carless, and this is personal for me because I want to make sure I can live in a city where I can bike, get on a train, get on a bus, or hop on a scooter to go to a job, to go to a meeting. And great cities are cities that truly prioritize mobility in all aspects of urban and city life. And as mayor, I want to do a couple things. Number one, I want to work with other urban city mayors across the state to make sure that our governor and state legislature give us our fair share of public transit investment dollars. Why are we prioritizing more highways in rural communities but not investing in public transit in the urban cores of Ohio? That's essential. Secondly, I think it's past time we have an integrated office of transit and mobility with the city, the county, NOACA, and RTA, and other key stakeholders to make sure, as a region, we're making the right transit-oriented development investments to ensure that transit access is real for all of our residents. And thirdly, I would say this. When you look at the pain points that we have for our working class residents, housing and transit costs make up about 40% of all the expenses going out every month for them. And I think it's past time we explore some kind of subsidy for working class residents in the city of Cleveland, have access to subsidized or free transit so they can get to a job or get to a healthcare appointment. That is essential in the city of Cleveland.
Kevin, let's talk about public transportation. So go ahead. What do you think we need to do, and do you think young professionals are taking advantage of it as it is?
So let me start with the very basics. As you stated, the people that are using public transportation are generally not young professionals. But who is it? It's people that need to get to jobs. It's people that are generally low income. It's people that need to get to a grocery store or somewhere nearby. And it's a critical service for them. RTA has not succeeded in expanding service. It has not succeeded in reducing fares or anything else. When Mr. Bibb was on the board, there was no progress made in terms of truly expanding service or lowering fares or expanding the service level of RTA. We need to understand that the state of Ohio does not fund public transportation in any reasonable way near where they should. Most of what comes to RTA, the local tax levy, the sales tax, is where they rely upon. Now, whether or not we think that the state of Ohio is going to suddenly change and think that this is a good idea and our General Assembly is suddenly going to start working for us, I don't think it's going to. So we need to look at what can we do in addition. So for example, we have the city funds the senior transportation connection. We need to look at how do we expand that to additional ridership for seniors. Right now it's 2 trips per week, but if you go to a doctor's appointment, you can go outside of Cuyahoga County, but if that transportation is to a grocery store, it has to be within the city of Cleveland. Now, while I encourage everybody to shop in the city of Cleveland, there are many of our neighborhoods that are in food deserts, and that is a challenge for people. So we need to expand services like that. We used to have circulators. We need to look at different transportation options. We can't just put all of our hopes on Greater Cleveland RTA. We need to look at different transportation options if we really want to provide a transportation system that works for everybody. And then we also have to look beyond that. We need to look at, what are we doing for, the pedestrians, for bike traffic? What are we doing for people that are on the sidewalks walking? We have to look at just, transportation as an entire system and not just rely on Greater Cleveland RTA.
I'm going to come back to Justin to talk a little bit on RTA as a board member and obviously to respond to the issue of what they faced with the expansion of service or not expansion of service. So Justin, if you could, in a minute or two, go ahead.
Yeah, with all due respect, the council president's comments are false. As a board member, I work with Cleveland Public Transit to help reduce fares last year, and it led to about a $1.3 million reduction in savings for low-income riders across our region. And then secondly, during my time on the board, we brought in a global expert in transit, Jared Walker, and he worked with our new CEO, India Birdsong, to execute the next gen bus route redesign, which focused on making sure we had buses with higher frequency in parts of our city that needed it the most. Now, was this route redesign perfect? Absolutely not, but India had to make some hard choices given the fiscal challenges that RTA faced during this pandemic and due to the fact that our state government has not given cities like Cleveland their fair share of resources. So we need an all-hands-on approach to fix public.
In terms of general system expansion, the minutes of the board meetings tell a different story.
And I know we could go on and on, back and forth on reasons why, and nobody is, disputing some of the things said here, but we will look to take that part of the conversation another time. But I have to ask, because I'm sure there's someone in the comments right now asking about those Jersey barriers on public squares. So quickly, yes or no, do you get rid of them?
100% yes.
Yes. But we have to make sure, because they've been there for so long, it's going to come with a cost. The roadway that was under there is going to be damaged. We as a community spent $50 million for this new public square, public and private, but $50 million to build this great, beautiful public square. And I used to bring my kids down there. We used to play in the fountains when they had those colorful, they were bugs, I don't know what they were. But we used to go down there and just spend time. But since the Jersey barriers went up, it's just a different feel of public square. We put too much into it to leave those Jersey barriers up and not to fully realize what public square can and should be.
Well, I think what we're hearing is they both want to get rid of them. We'll figure out how, once they're there. I think the first thing we need is the will to do it, because that has not been the case in the current administration. I'm going to kind of take a hybrid of the next couple of questions, because they've already hit on some of these topics and we don't want to be redundant, and we again want to get to audience participation. What's more important, if you can say this, Kevin, if it's this simple, building new homes in commercial space or trying to better utilize our existing homes and storefronts?
Both. It's not that simple. We absolutely need to make sure that we are putting dollars into the renovation of our existing properties, our existing structures, but we have to continue to build new. The neighborhood I live in is a beautiful neighborhood. I live in Old Brooklyn, a great family-friendly neighborhood. But when we were looking for a house, as my family started to expand, I have 5 daughters, and there's a certain point where
you need more bathrooms.
Exactly. We had 1.5 bathrooms, and when they started moving in the teenage years, I had to get to work at a certain point. But when I looked for a bigger home in my neighborhood, it was really hard to find a home that had more than 2 full baths or more. So we need to make sure that we're always investing in additional housing products and making sure that we're building the types of homes so that we have an offering for every family and what their needs are.
An issue closely tied to all of this is tax abatement. Yep. Would you continue the current tax abatement policy for housing and the one that is currently out there for other infrastructure?
Tax abatement has been a great tool for the city of Cleveland. It has resulted in investment, but it has outlived its useful life in its current form. It needs to be modernized. I think that maybe we need to, and again, this is all going to be part of the 10-year housing plan, and we're going to have to make a decision on tax abatement in the upcoming years. But I think that we need to take a look at, maybe every neighborhood doesn't need a full 15-year tax abatement. Maybe some neighborhoods where there's disinvestment need more. But it needs to be used as an incentive to invest in neighborhoods that are underserved or underinvested. I do think that there's an absolute path for coming up with, we have enough data, we have enough, down to the census block where we can make the right decision on tax abatement, as well as how we dispose of land bank lots.
Thank you. Let's button that part there. Let's come to you. I'll restate that original question, which was from Engage Cleveland on what's more important right now, building new homes in commercial space or utilizing those. Let's talk about that, and then certainly address the tax abatement policy discussion.
Well, Mark, I think this question speaks to a larger issue we've had in Cleveland for a long time, that we've had a one-size-fits-all approach to economic and community development, and clearly it's not working. As I travel across the city, particularly where I was born and raised in Mount Pleasant and the Southeast Side, there are parts of the Southeast Side I haven't seen any real investment in generations. And they're screaming out to see cranes in the sky in their neighborhoods like we see in Tremont, Ohio City, and Detroit Sherway. And so we need to make sure that as a city, we are using the right tools and the right policies that fit the unique characteristics of the needs of every neighborhood in the city of Cleveland. As it speaks to the abatement policy, I agree, we need to truly re-examine our tax abatement policy long term. And I want to make sure as mayor that we explore having targeted incentives tied to our abatement policy to have more investments in affordable workforce housing and transit-oriented development, particularly in our underserved communities of color, because they need these investments now more than ever.
Somewhat related, and this will get us into another question. We'll start with you, Justin, on specifically on some of the neighborhood investment. Under Mayor Jackson, it does get overlooked. He did have quite a bit that was being pushed into the neighborhoods through his opportunity programs. What would you do to address just that point that maybe the Tremonts and Detroit Shoreways don't need as much as some of the other communities?
Well, I think Mayor Jackson's neighborhood transformation plan, particularly in Glenville, was a good step in the right direction. There's some good things we can build on that. I want to just make sure we are scaling that work, putting more funding around that work. We have a unique opportunity right now with the American Rescue Plan dollars to have more targeted investments in those forgotten neighborhoods. And the next mayor must do a better job of going out to the private sector, working with our foundations to really expand the balance sheet of the city to ensure we can have more dollars to put back in those neighborhoods.
And Kevin, if you wanted to follow up on any issues specifically on the neighborhoods investment and what you've seen as council president during that time.
Yes, please. So obviously there's disparity in investment, and where it is, it's a lot of where the private sector chooses to invest or not invest. The neighborhood transformation plan is an important step to move forward, and what it should do is, if you take Glen Village project, which is at the corner of 105th and Ashbury. That is a beautiful development. It's mixed use at retail on the street level and apartments above. It's a fantastic development. But what everybody should be aware of is that all of those things that planners look at, traffic counts, average income, purchasing power, it was all there beforehand. But before the city bonded the dollars and council passed the 25 million, before the city went to the private sector to leverage another 67 million, the private sector did not want to invest in Glenville. So what Glen Village should show, what we're going to see on Buckeye, what we're going to see on West 25th Street across from Metro Hospital, is that every neighborhood can succeed. And investment in every neighborhood needs to be a priority, and we have to look at both commercial and residential. So for commercial, we need to use a model that's been set forth by the neighborhood transformation plan. For residential, just recently, I sponsored and council passed the first $1 million to go into a pool of what's called the Middle Neighborhoods Fund. I don't love the name, but we just have to work with it. The Middle Neighborhoods Fund is a loan loss reserve program with Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, and that first $1 million, we were the first in because we were going to use that to leverage other philanthropic private sector dollars to make sure that we set up a loan loss reserve fund. If somebody wants to invest in one of our neighborhoods and they can't do so either because of an appraisal gap or a gap in their ability to put the full 20% down payment, this fund would cover those gaps. And Baltimore runs a similar program, and in the, I believe, 4 years since Baltimore's had their program, there has been less than 5 times that this fund had to be tapped. Because if you think about it, if a buyer is otherwise good, except for an appraisal gap, or except for a small gap in getting the 20% down payment, they're a pretty good risk, and that is proven out. And we need to make sure that we are giving people opportunities to invest in our neighborhoods. Cleveland City Council took the first step. I was proud to be the sponsor of that legislation. I'm looking forward to those types of products.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Justin, you're welcome to add more on that topic because the next one kind of gets a little bit, we're going to play off of that, and that's really looking at the pandemic impact. And just for context, the city of Cleveland gets about $500 million from federal pandemic money, half of which is now coming to the city. The next mayor will probably have a much greater opportunity to spend the second half. There has been talk by both of these candidates of using some of that money for those neighborhood investments to help improve it. So if you want to address anything more on it and then talk about how you might spend that money.
Yeah. Well, I would say this. Number one, I think it was prudent by this mayor to use some of that money to absorb the revenue loss we saw during the pandemic last year, because we need to have a solid rainy day fund to prepare for any future recession or any future crisis we might have in the city of Cleveland. I would also say this. It's important that we use these dollars to invest in what's working, scale some of the best practices that we see in our community, but also this is a once-in-a-generational opportunity to finally use this money to eradicate our lead paint crisis that exists in our community and truly have digital inclusion to close the digital divide. And this is a problem that we missed year after year, an opportunity to do this over the last 16 years. And we saw during this pandemic last year that access to broadband is a basic economic right in America. And excited to see some progress on that, but the public needs to be a part of this process moving forward. And that's why, as mayor, I've supported having participatory budgeting process for the American Rescue Plan dollars. And I want to make sure that we have participatory budgeting in place every year when we execute our city budget moving forward as a city.
And Kevin, I'll let you just briefly follow up on any issues on that $500 million. I know as a city leader right now you are dealing with that, but we've got more questions and we're going to get to the audience shortly, so go ahead briefly.
Sure. The ARPA dollars are a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and first off, revenue recovery is going to have to be job one. We've lost a tremendous amount of money in income taxes, in entertainment taxes, hotel bed taxes, parking taxes. So we have to make sure that the city has a sound financial footing. That's got nothing else. We can't do anything else unless we have that sound financial footing. We need to make sure we deal with food insecurity. We've seen tremendous upgrowth in food insecurity. We need to support the food bank. We need to support Cleveland Hunger Network. We need to deal with broadband. We are the least connected big city in the United States of America. And it's not that we've missed opportunities in the past. We know the path. There's been planning, there's been talks. I'm part of the Digital Inclusion Committee along with about 25 members of the community that we've been working on for years. There is a plan. The problem is we haven't had money. Now we have an opportunity to really solve this. We have an opportunity to deal with this, and it's a specific line item. There's a lot of vagueness in what qualifies under these ARPA dollars. One thing that is unambiguous, is absolute, is broadband access. That is something that is specifically called out in the requirements. So we need to make sure we're dealing with this. Another thing we need to look at is, who did this pandemic hurt the most, and how can we use these dollars to help them? People that have been hurt by the pandemic the most: women, people of color, people working in the hospitalities, people working in small businesses, restaurants. How do we step forward and help them? How do we make sure that we support this very important base level, elemental part of our economy? And we need to do that through using these dollars to make sure, like we did when businesses were waiting for their PPP loans to come through. You know, the city of Cleveland put up a fund. We put millions of dollars into a fund to bridge that gap. So if you're a small business waiting for your federal dollars, the federal government doesn't move very fast. We had to get dollars out to small businesses to make sure that they could just keep their doors open. But that just has to be our top priority, is really just focusing on who did COVID hurt the most. As we all know, there's a lot of people that did very well during COVID. Many people made a lot of money. Many people were hurt tremendously. We've just got to prioritize where these dollars are going.
We're going to kind of play off of that a little bit. We'll come to you, Justin, on this. During Mayor Frank Jackson's 16-year tenure, he's had really two recessions and a pandemic, so it's very likely any mayor may be faced at some point with a financial crisis. This is a question from Engage Cleveland. They are interested in knowing, what departments would you cut first, or how would you balance and keep a balanced budget going if you faced a crisis?
Well, the first thing I would say is I'm going to make sure that in every budget process we set aside dedicated dollars to ensure we can maintain high quality basic city services in the future. That's essential. Secondly, if a recession does occur, I as mayor have to ensure we can still provide the basics to our residents. Everything from trash collection to recycling, when we actually have a good recycling program in the city of Cleveland. I intend to make that happen as mayor, and also ensure that we can keep our communities safe and secure so they can feel safe in their respective neighborhoods. But the one thing I would say is this: as mayor or in any executive position, you got to make hard choices. And the best thing to do to have the faith of residents and the faith of folks that you serve is to make sure that their voice feels heard in the process. So if we do have a recession, I'm going to make sure that I talk to residents about the hard choices I need to make as mayor, get their input so there's full buy-in on what we need to do as a city to sacrifice to get beyond this crisis and get back to a path towards economic prosperity.
Kevin, as mayor, you would be in a different position for sure than council president to make cuts. How would you deal with it?
So Mark, as you know, in the past 10 years, we have had 2 major recessions. And the recession prior to this was made worse by the fact that it coincided with the time that the state of Ohio chose to cut our local government fund. So it took a bad situation and made it a lot worse. This last recession was our deepest recession, but our shortest recession. And many economists have speculated that we may not be out of this, that wasn't the correction that was anticipated. That's why it is just crucial that the mayor of the city of Cleveland is ready to be mayor on day one, has seen recessions, has seen budgets, understands what departments produce revenue for the city, which don't. How do we make decisions in terms of making sure that the basic city services are provided, safety services are provided? There's certain things that just cannot, we call them essential services, call them what you want, but there are certain things that we just cannot compromise on. But in a recession, you have to do difficult things. I'm very pleased. I've been the chairman of the finance department, committee for over 10 years, and what I've seen is that we did not lay anybody off during this recession. In the prior recession, we didn't lay anybody off except for where there's one local that we couldn't come to terms with that chose layoffs over furloughs. But these are people's lives. Our 7,500 employees are important assets to the city of Cleveland. They're an important part of our future, of our progress. But we have to be ready for a recession at any time. We are often, people will point to the fact that we do have a rainy day fund and unencumbered cash. Well, we have to plan for that. If you look at I think that the greatest accomplishment, the city's best asset or the best thing going, if you look back in the past, whether it's 16, 20 years, the financial health of the city, managing through 2 major recessions, keeping our bond ratings high, keeping our service level where it is. This was not easy. These things don't just happen. It's very difficult when you have to. We are not like the federal government. The city of Cleveland is by law not permitted to run a deficit. We have to only spend what we bring in. And that's why it's critical that we have somebody that knows how to manage the finances of the city immediately. This is I think the question that, what about another recession? We need to make sure that the person who is mayor has the understanding of municipal government and understands all the challenges that face us, because it is likely to happen.
All right, Kevin, thank you. Justin, you're welcome to add something on that, but I'll throw you the next question so you can see how that fits in. Since we're talking about the pandemic and on one sense a financial crisis, there was also a real health crisis, and clearly I think some could make the case one of the failures of Cleveland City Hall has been its health department, which saw turnover and turmoil in the heart of the pandemic. The question from Engage Cleveland is, how do you get us, Cleveland, out of this health crisis?
I would say a couple things. Number one, obviously I've never been mayor before, but I've had my fair share of executive experiences where I've seen what it takes to make hard choices. The chairman and CEO of Gallup, Jim Clifton, brought me back to Gallup for 3 years to help build city's advisory business, working with big city mayors, medium-sized city mayors all across the country on how to better use data and technology to improve basic city services. And the key part of my job at Gallup was to really use the voices of the people to make those decisions. And then I was fortunate to work for our hometown bank, Key Bank, and I worked with executives like Randy Payne and Beth Mooney and Clark Hyatt to help run one of Key's largest businesses, which was a $1.7 billion business. And so I have the executive experience, but also the lived experience of a working class kid from this city. And I think the next mayor must not only have the business acumen, but also the understanding of what it's like to go through these issues. He talked about the health crisis. We have a council and a mayor that has led us to have a public health department that has a budget of less than 2% of our entire city budget. We didn't have an epidemiologist in our health department during this pandemic. Our Spanish-speaking brothers and sisters couldn't get the information they needed during this pandemic. So when you talk about what kind of experience we need, experience in the status quo has gotten us to this point. And in this election, we have an opportunity to turn the page and finally get leadership that's grounded in the lived experiences of our residents, because more of the same ain't gonna cut it. And we can't miss this moment right now in our city.
Kevin, obviously, I want you to address the question, and you're welcome to tackle some of the specifics on the health department. But how do you get the city out of the health crisis, not the financial one, and then your experience in dealing with that city hall department?
Certainly. So the health department, the 2% statistic is one that is just not true, because much of the Department of Health is grant funded. So it doesn't come out of the general fund budget, but a lot of it comes through federal grants, state grants that aren't reflected just because they're passed through. But the Department of Health and our Spanish-speaking brothers and sisters do have access, because that is one of the things that I did working with legal aid, is to put in place a language access plan for the city of Cleveland, whereby every person that comes in the city of Cleveland, there is now a card with the 8 most frequently spoken languages that you can point to the language. We have interpretive services. All of our forms were put in multiple languages. All of our public-facing employees were trained in different languages and language access. And that was the hardest part, is getting the training of these 7,500 employees to make sure that language access is a part of what we do. But in terms of how do we move forward out of this crisis, dealing with the health component of it. And again, it's just heartbreaking to think about the number of Cleveland citizens that we've lost during this, the people that have been ill. It's just a terrible tragedy. The most important thing we can do is encourage vaccinations. And we have taken steps forward in doing that, but we just have to continue on a hyper-local deployment plan. We need to get to churches, we need to community centers, we need to make sure that it is ridiculously easy to get a vaccination, and we need to reach out and make sure that people understand how to get it. When I was knocking on doors throughout this campaign, one woman told me, she was an elderly woman, and she said, I just didn't know, nobody called me, and I didn't know where to go to get this vaccine. We need to make sure that there's access and people are really reaching out to do this. And while we do this, we have to remember something else. During COVID, opioid abuse didn't go away. Infant mortality didn't go away. Lead poisoning didn't go away. We still have a tremendous amount of health crises that we need to deal with, and we need to make sure that the Department of Health is encompassing all of that.
Justin, do you think the city could have done more on the vaccination point that Kevin brought up, to be out there to push through to those communities? What did you hear and see on that?
Absolutely. The council president talked about we should have been knocking on doors, but I didn't see them knocking on doors when the pandemic started to give information about what was going on about getting tested for COVID-19. We didn't see city workers going door to door, engaging with clergy in a robust way to make sure that folks had access to the vaccine. And so it's important that the next mayor truly do a better job of bringing government to the people day in and day out beyond just an election cycle. That's critical. And there are best practices from all across the country of mayors leaning in and doing things differently to ensure residents had the information they needed during this pandemic.
And we're going to get to audience questions right after this. We'll give Kevin just a small rebuttal on the issue of reaching out to residents on the pandemic.
Yeah. It's interesting that Mr. Bibb said that people were knocking on doors. I mean, I don't know why you don't know this, but when I mentioned that we didn't lay off staff during the pandemic, we took our staff and we did just that. We redeployed our recreation centers, all the non-essential employees, to do just that, to go in the community, to knock on doors, to spread the word about how do you get vaccines. That happened. And again, there's if you didn't know, I can't help that. But I assure you that part of the reason that we were able to not lay off people and put them to work was doing just that type of activity, taking our residents, taking our workers and putting them in the community to try to increase education, try to let people know where the resources were.
People want to see their leaders out there, visible leadership.
Well, they can't be visible if you're not looking. And that's, if you don't notice it, we can't help that.
Well, there's definitely campaign differences on this, and I would encourage people to take a look back at some coverage of that pandemic period and see what has been covered about those city efforts, and you guys can sort through it. I want to get to audience questions now, and we're going to have people come up to this microphone. This is where I might assert myself a little bit more. I want to try to keep these as questions rather than statements. I'll also try to keep the candidates tight and on point so we can get to lots of questions. And I think typically in these settings, there's questions that are going to feel like they're favoring one candidate or another, but each will get a chance to respond fairly. Without a clock in front of me, we'll do our best. So if we have questions from the audience, make your way to that microphone. And if not, I'm going to keep asking questions. And we're also going to be taking questions from that stream, Twitter, that we mentioned earlier. So I think we've got one coming through now.
Yeah, so this is from Will Tarter on Twitter. For young professionals who are interested in
We
serving...
know Will.
Who are interested in serving on city boards and commissions, what steps will you take to build bridges to connect young adults to service opportunities on city boards and ensure their voices are included in the decision-making in the city?
All right, I know both have already touched on it. I promise we'll start with Kevin and we'll go to Justin.
Thank you. For anybody who wants to serve on a board or commission, anybody who is able, please forward your resume. Please reach out, because the boards and commissions, we need good people. We need talented people to serve on those boards. The challenge is that some of the boards have a certain requirement. If it's Board of Building Standards, you've got to be an engineer, architect. There's certain things that you have to check off, but more importantly, you have to give up a significant chunk of time, and that's where we have a difficult time bringing professional people to serve on boards and commissions, because you have to give up, Board of Zoning Appeals, you have to give up every Monday morning you just have to give up every Monday morning. And that does not work with a lot of people's schedules. And whether it's Planning Commission, whether it's Board of Zoning Appeals, whether it's Board of Building Standards, anything that we can do to encourage more participation, I will do as mayor.
Justin, I know you talk about this on the campaign trail, so go ahead.
It's critical. I'd say every person in my cabinet and every board and commission must reflect the diversity of our city. As mayor, I intend to make sure we are proactive in reaching out to organizations like Engage Cleveland to let you know how to apply to be on a board and commission, what's the requirement, because without that proactive outreach, you may not know, and it's critical. I would also say this, we got to make it easier for folks to feel like they can show up and apply and eliminate the barriers that do exist. You're never too young to serve, and that's going to be my mantra as the next mayor.
Yeah, and in the old days, you got on boards and commissions by volunteering on campaigns for candidates, so keep that in mind if anybody's really wondering. All right, we'll go to another audience question.
Hi. I'm a young professional of course, and I have friends that have intentionally chosen to put their real property money into the city of Cleveland, but I don't know if I'm quite as susceptible to risk-taking as they are to follow in their footsteps, right? So when I'm considering price per square foot, I'm thinking about safety and school quality, right, for the next decade or more of my life. How can Cleveland start to compete with the suburbs so that we can regain so much of that lost population that never left the county?
Well, we could do a whole forum on that for sure. We'll rotate back and forth. So Justin, you'll start with this one. Kevin, you'll be able to address it. I think you got the question.
We didn't talk a lot about education, and I've worked on the front lines of education reform throughout my career. I would say a couple of things. I think that we have done some great work in Cleveland with improving public education. I believe the Cleveland Plan was a good step in the right direction. We have some great portfolio schools like the John Hay Science Academy, Campus International. I think Breakthrough is a good public charter model that's a part of CMSD, which I think is fantastic. But I think we need to do a better job of investing in teacher quality and teacher effectiveness, giving our teachers the tools they need. I'm a big believer in hiring more teachers of color inside the city of Cleveland, because all the data tells you that when a child shares a lived experience with their teacher, they're more likely to be engaged in the classroom and graduate high school and be career and college ready. That's essential. And then, as I said before in my comments, making sure that our children have access to the jobs of the future when they're in middle school and high school is critical to having a competitive school district inside the city of Cleveland. That's how we keep families in the core of the city and not see them go to Shaker or Rocky River or Beechwood.
Kevin, on the same issue.
Thank you. You hit on the two issues that families generally consider when they're making a decision of where do we invest, where do we see our future, safety in schools. We talked at the top of the show about how important safety is, how important it is that every Clevelander feels safe in their home, in their street, in their neighborhood. I'm fortunate that my kids were able to walk to school, ride their bikes. There's other neighborhoods where people don't feel that way, and that is unfortunate. That is not acceptable. On the schools, I've had my kids in Catholic schools, partner charter schools, and CMSD schools. And I can say right now in CMSD is the best education experience that we've had. But what we need to do moving forward is we need to move from there being diamonds in the rough, there being some high-performing buildings in an otherwise struggling school district, and lift the whole school district. I'm fortunate that there is a school in my neighborhood that is performing very high. Not every neighborhood has that. My wife was a substitute teacher in CMSD, and the disparity in quality is there. And we need to make sure that we are focused on where the need is and making sure that we bring up all of our schools, not just a building at a time. And we can't succeed with some buildings succeeding and others failing. Every neighborhood needs to have a school where they can send their kids if people like you are going to choose to invest and see your future in the city of Cleveland.
Thank you again for that question and for the answers. We'll go to another audience.
Sure, thank you. So, unlike yourself, I've chosen to invest as a homeowner in the city of Cleveland, in a rapidly gentrifying area. Something I hear at my block club quite regularly is from the fixed income members of our community that as property taxes are increasing, they are feeling more and more pressure to move out of the neighborhood. So while I've been blessed as a young professional to be able to invest in my property, afford property taxes, and obviously reap the benefits of increasing property values, I'm wondering what you guys propose to help keep fixed income type of residents to maintain that diversity as neighborhoods do gentrify.
We'll keep the rotation going, so we'll start with Kevin and then we'll go to Justin. Go ahead, Kevin.
Great, thank you. No, that is an extremely important question. There are some of our neighborhoods that are thriving, but part of the reason they're thriving is that people that have been there a long time, that have been there through thick and thin, weathered the storm, and now they're being priced out of their neighborhood, and that's not okay. The reason that whether pick Ohio City, pick Tremont, Detroit, Troy, there are those that stayed when things weren't good, and what we need to do is we need to look at a long-time owner-occupied property owner exemption or cap on property taxes. Philadelphia is probably the best model. But we started down this path, and it needed state authority. State Senator Sandra Williams has introduced this, and we believe that it is going to be that the state will give us this authority. I sponsored a resolution that was passed to City Council supporting that, and the minute we get authority from the state, so long as I'm council president, if it happens quickly, or mayor, that is going to be enacted so that we do protect those people that have been with us along as weathered the storm, invested, raised their families, put their money, put their lives in Cleveland.
Justin.
Too bad we're 10 years too late. I agree, as I said, since I announced my campaign in January, that, far too many of our residents, particularly our seniors, can't age in place and retire and live a life of dignity in the neighborhoods that they've been there for a long time. I believe we do need long-term property tax relief for those homeowners that have been fighting the good fight. And it's a shame that it's taken us this long to come up with a solution, because we've seen other cities across the country tackle this already. And I think it speaks to this larger point I talked about before about this one-size-fits-all approach to economic development. That has to stop. We gotta have a city hall that understands that every neighborhood's gonna need different tools and different resources to thrive, and we need a mayor at 601 Lakeside Avenue who understands that nuance and difference.
Okay, thank you. I think we've got another question from our live streaming audience coming through.
Yeah, so this is from Cassie James on Twitter. How would you look to re-envision police and city response to demonstrations after the events that occurred last summer?
We'll go to Justin on that. Obviously, it's a topic both candidates have talked about a lot, and that gets to police reform issues. For the audience, there is a federal consent decree, which is just a fancy word for an agreement that they've cut with the city of Cleveland to reform police. That predates quite a bit of history with protests and even police shootings. That's still underway. So now we'll go to how you guys plan to deal with those improved relations.
Well, this is personal for me. My dad was a cop, and there were many moments that I thought my dad wouldn't come home at night. But my dad also recognized that he was raising a black man in a majority black city where black people didn't trust the police. And he said, Justin, when you get pulled over, it's yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. And many people in my community knew about the talk. And I believe the next mayor must be honest and real about doing the real work of reimagining what policing should look like in a post-George Floyd world. Because we've seen Cleveland be a tragic case study of what happens when we don't have real accountability in our police department. That's why I'm proud to support the Safer Cleveland ballot initiative. Now, is this initiative perfect? No, it's not. But I think we gotta try. We gotta try to do things differently, because we can't have real safety in our neighborhoods if our residents don't trust the police. This initiative is gonna make sure we have folks from the community who have been brutalized by police, but also folks from law enforcement will have a seat around the table to make sure we can build the right culture, have the right accountability, and give our officers the right tools to do the hard work of good policing. That should be the standard in every city. And I believe Cleveland can be a national model of police reform if we think hard and deeper about what the real work will take to move our community forward on this important topic.
All right, Kevin, I don't think you need to be reminded of the question. If you do, let me know. But I think you've been hearing this on the trail a lot. So how do we improve those relations post George Floyd demonstrations, and then obviously address the issue? What Justin was referring to is there is a ballot initiative that is on the November ballot that aims to reform police oversight and shift some of that responsibility outside of City Hall. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you. So at the neighborhood level, we need to do what I mentioned earlier. We need to have true community police. We need to have foot patrols, bike patrols. We need to talk to people. We need to build that trust at the community level through community relations committees, through an active community service unit division of police. We need to do that. In terms of the broader issue that was brought up, the consent decree has the path towards police reform. And the consent decree does not go away until we've met each and every one of those goals. And if you read the consent decree, and if you understand what needs to happen, and if you follow that, the need for this issue 24 should be troubling to all of us. I am not supporting issue 24, and I would encourage you to read the language of issue 24. And if for those of you, I mean, I'm in this this world I live in terms of how do we improve policing. One of the biggest problems we have right now is how do we recruit, train, and retain police officers. If you're going to take a person's livelihood and put it in the hands of an unelected civilian board who has the final authority over civilian decisions, and you're going to give them a $2 million plus budget per year that goes up each year, and give another 0.5% of the Division of Police's budget to give out, this is quickly going to become a political board. This civilian board is quickly going to become political. That's where corruption happens. And do we really want, if whether it's your brother, your sister, your son, your daughter, are you going to encourage that person to join the Division of Police with an unelected civilian board being the final authority? Right now, the chief of police is the chief of police, and the mayor can fire the chief. I know how to get rid of a chief of police. I would ask anybody who is here in the audience or watching, do you know how you get rid of one of these civilian members? It is something that is going to make our streets less safe. It's something that is not going to encourage more cooperation. It's going to cause more division between the police and the community, and we're going to have a really hard time ever getting to the number of police officers that City Council budgeted for.
Well, what I hope the audience appreciates is that we do see a real difference in the candidates on this element of safety. They both agree safety is a top priority, need to do more. Issue 24 is that amendment we referred to. I'm going to give Justin a little rebuttal on that because this is a stark difference, and again, I hope people appreciate that. So Justin, there are issues in that amendment's language that is being debated, has been debated for many months on whether it will tie your hands or not tie your hands or set off legal disaster, from the standpoint of collective bargaining with the police unions who will challenge this the day it passes, if it does pass.
See, this is what happens when the status quo sees real change. You do misinformation and you engage in fear tactics. Let me tell you what this thing does. Number one, the mayor, with council authority, appoints every member of this commission. Number two, the mayor or the council cannot terminate anybody without a public hearing. So the public will have a say. And then thirdly, every member of the commission must be reflective of our community. Folks that have been victimized by the police, folks that have been involved in law enforcement or have legal background, so we can put together the right culture and training in our department. This is not an anti-police initiative. This is about thinking differently about how we change the culture of accountability of policing. And I'm going to say this, I'm not power hungry. I'm not going to be a power hungry mayor. And I believe as mayor, I'm willing to share power with the people of Cleveland if it allows us to rebuild that trust between police and our residents. My grandma, Sarah, who was one of the first presidents of my neighborhood watch club growing up on one of the toughest blocks in the city at the height of the crack epidemic, she wants more police, but she also wants the police to show up on time and respect her constitutional rights. And I want to create one of the best cultures in America for good cops to show up every single day. And that's what's at stake in this election, and that's going to be my mandate as the next mayor, to lead on that issue.
Thank
Mark,
you. Let's move on. But
this issue is so important. You just have to read it, and people need just ask, where did the initiative, where was it born? Who paid for the signature collection? This was not a Cleveland-born issue. The signature collection was paid for by, out of Cleveland group from Washington. Look at this thing, folks. When something sounds really nice, look at the details, and this is just that event.
And you can find that initiative, at least the summary on the Board of Elections, and Google around, you can get the full thing. Again, an issue we'll follow up. We'll be following up on this issue at WKYC as well. But I want to get some more audience questions, so let's take it away.
Hi, Carrie Burns. I want to go back to families in Cleveland. I'm a working mother, and in March of 2020, I went home. My 3-year-old son at the time came home, and he didn't go back till 2 weeks ago when preschool started. And for the last 19 months, I've been scrambling to find childcare, to find preschools, and it's been really hard. There's not a lot of options. There's a lot of wait lists. Things are expensive. As mayor, do you have a plan, or what could you do to help working families with childcare and preschool? Thank you.
We'll start with Kevin on this one. So childcare, preschool, what's the plan? Can there be a plan that's possible?
Thank you. My family went through a similar experience as you, but fortunately I didn't need the child care. My daughter was just old enough, and with her sisters being home, we were okay. But I understand what families go through when COVID hit, in terms of like, how do you go back to work when you've got a child who has to be in the home? That's why we really need to look at expanding universal pre-K. That's something, Pre-for-CLE is something that I work with the county on to make sure that got launched. But we need to make sure that there are additional resources for families, both before school and after school. That's one thing like I say, I'm a CMSD dad, and I'm very, very cognizant of what happens. That's where we really need to make sure that we are providing an education system that is family friendly, that is something families can use, but making sure that we have those universal pre-K options, making sure that we have after-school activities, extracurriculars. That's the area we're struggling right now. We need to make sure that this happens, because again, when you look at some of the conversation about why it's hard to find people to come back to work, and people speculate, well, they're getting this unemployment. I always say, well, no, there's more to it than that. Finding childcare, we have just rearranged our schedules as families and as a community over the past year. We can't just snap back immediately. We need to find out what are those options, what are those resources to make sure that families, parents go back to work and kids can go back to school, and it can be done in a schedule that works for the family.
Thank you, Kevin. Justin, on this issue of childcare and helping working mothers and fathers.
Well, fortunately, in Cleveland and Cuyahoga County, we have a really solid foundation to build on. The county for decades has invested in early childhood education. The city, through the leadership of Eric Gordon and others, has started a Pre-for-CLE initiative to expand the number of high quality early childhood seats and slots that are available in the city of Cleveland. But what we also saw during this pandemic, as folks were working remotely, they were able to keep their families in the home. And so we saw a lot of our child care providers go out of business, particularly in the urban core and inner city of Cleveland. So as we claw our way out of this pandemic, the city must take a more proactive role, working with the county and our foundation partners to increase the number of quality early childhood slots that are available. We need to do a better job of incentivizing our employers to invest in early childhood education for our employees so they can go back to work, and making sure that they have some of those facilities on site in the workplace. We should explore having that inside City Hall potentially, so that we can have City Hall employees come to work and have a dedicated facility for their children. And so until we have a city that works for our children, we won't be that city of opportunity. And if we can be one of the best cities for children, then we can be one of the best cities in America.
Thank you. I like that people are standing and waiting for questions, so we're going to get to both of you.
Like the City Club.
Yes. Without the bell.
Yeah.
Hi, Christina here. It's been great listening to all of these ideas, and it's getting me so excited about future change in Cleveland. But as a voter, it's hard to foresee what would happen when you actually got elected, because when you become elected, it's just hard. It's really hard to make change. And I want to know a bit about how you are thinking you'd actually be able to make change. So could you share an example of something that you achieved where maybe everybody thought it was a crazy idea, but you won people over, or you got people on board and made change. And I want to know what that process was like.
Thank you. I think we're Justin on this one. Audience, help me out here. Go Kevin first. See, smarter than me always. Go ahead, Kevin.
Great, thank you for the question. And you hit on something that is fundamental in this campaign and in government, is that change is easy to talk about. It's hard to do. It's hard to move systems, but that's what the mayor of the city of Cleveland is going to be entrusted with doing. How do you make change? The first issue I took on as council president was to deal with our community's shameful rate of infant mortality. What do we do about it? Where do we start? We'll start with the basics. There's a lot of good people doing a lot of good things in this space, but they're not doing so in any coordinated fashion, and they're not being resourced in a way that's moving the needle at all. So we began in the conference room of Cleveland City Hall, Cleveland City Council. We basically brought together providers. We brought together, folks from Moms First, from the major healthcare system, the philanthropic community, the federally qualified health centers. We brought people that were doing the work together and asked them, why are we not succeeding? Why are we not moving the needle? Why are we not moving together? And it was that collective input, that collective, using people's experiences that are in the business, that do the work, and finding out what their challenges are. Because as mayor, you have to know what you don't know, and you can't know everybody's experience. You've got to start with those that are doing the work. So what did we do? We brought people together. We brought this coalition together. We talked for a long time in terms of what are best practices and what has to happen to move the needle on this. And from this was born First Year Cleveland. And in our first year of formation, we received over $10 million from Ohio Medicaid to make sure that the providers had the resources that they did. The results have been positive. And I hate to even use the term positive when we're talking about such a serious issue, but the results have lowered our shameful rate of babies dying before their first birthday. And that is something that we will continue, and it's uncovered other problems. It's uncovered things that should have been obvious before us, which is the birth outcomes by race. The fact that a white woman who did not graduate from high school, who did not have proper prenatal care, has better birth outcomes than a black woman who's middle class, who has employer provided insurance. That was shocking. That's what led to the 400 Years of Racism Conference. That's what led to the Racism as a Public Health Crisis resolution by the City of Cleveland. But it's that approach that I take to things. And it's the same approach I've taken when we were doing right to counsel to indigent defendants. We talked to the legal community, we talked to the landlords, we talked to tenants, and we found out what are the barriers here? Why is it that we have this uneven playing field, and how do we resource this in such a way to get there? Because it's easy to talk about things, it's harder to make change, and the hardest part of all is getting the resources behind it to actually make the change. But that's one example.
And I think you gave her an example of how you've done it, but I think the other part of her question was, as mayor, what might you do that's going to surprise people or blow something up or be outside the box? Is there anything?
Sure. First thing I'm going to do is, well, I don't know if it's first, but one of my day one activities is we need to take this, we need to just stop accepting the fact that we live in this community with all these available jobs, and we have all of these, a cohort of people that are unemployed and underemployed yearning for opportunity. I'm gonna take the same approach, and I'm gonna let education, labor, industry know that what we're doing is not working. We need to understand in this community that you cannot fail a kid K-12 and put a program in place and think that program is going to work and that person is suddenly going to become job ready. We need to have an approach that brings people together, but basically lets people know that, yeah, I know you've got a program, that program isn't working. We need to just stop accepting what doesn't work as something that's going to move on, and we need to put in place that which will work. And I think that if we take the same approach of collaborating and bring people together, it will work, because right now we're in a very unique point in history, in Cleveland's history anyhow, where industry needs people as much as people need opportunities. And we have just got to stop accepting where we are right now. We need to go back to 5th, 6th grade, make sure that we are educating. We need to do programs like we're doing at MCPC, where we reached out to Rhodes High School because they realized we have a workforce problem and we have our own problems that we want to solve. So they reached out to CMSD. We're working with Rhodes High School right now. We take a cohort of kids from Rhodes High School. It's an hour of instruction, 3 hours of work. They get paid for a 4-hour block, but instilling learn and earn. Making sure that Say Yes is a part of our everyday language in the city of Cleveland. Making sure people understand that there is opportunity, that people just need access to opportunities. I'm going to do everything that is going to be focused towards that access to opportunity.
Thank you, Kevin. I'll give you a couple minutes on this, Justin. There's a lot there. It's a question I know you guys have talked a bit about. So again, coming into City Hall, how are you going to be different? What's your track record of being different? What might we see?
I was appointed to the board of RTA in 2018. And for folks that don't know this yet, I'm a big technology and data geek. And I was appointed to the board at the time we were coming out of a major CEO transition and change. We had a couple issues around political corruption. And I was hesitant to join the board in and of itself because of those issues. But my mom said, if you really want to serve, go where it's hard and see if you can get something done. And as we brought our new CEO on board, India Birdsong, I talked to her about, is there a way to better think about how to use technology and data to help modernize RTA for the 21st century? She said, yeah. I says, well, I want to create my own committee on technology and innovation at RTA. So they gave me the ability to do that. And in a short amount of time, we did a couple things. Number one, we led an effort to live stream every RTA board meeting to the public before COVID-19, so our riders could get up-to-date information on how to access a bus or a train, especially if you're an essential worker trying to get to your job during this pandemic. One of the second things we did was we worked with the transit police to put body cams on every transit police officer inside RTA to get more accountability on police misconduct inside the agency. And the third thing we did was I worked with India to create a job description to hire the first ever Chief Innovation Officer at RTA. Now, I'm no longer on the board of RTA because I'm running for mayor, but I'm proud to say that committee is still going and RTA is still working hard to make some of these changes. And it's that kind of consensus building, approach to collaboration, and thinking differently about how you use data and technology I'm going to bring as the next mayor. And if there's one landmark issue I want to have as mayor, and I don't care if it's politically hard to do, and if it makes me a one-term mayor, so be it. But if I can make Cleveland a national model of getting policing right in the post-era of George Floyd, then I will die a happy man. And as the son of a cop, this is something that's personal to me because I've lost too many friends to violent crime, and I've seen how we can do this right. And if Cleveland can be that model, then we can see real racial justice one day in Cleveland. That's my hope for our city.
Thank you. We do have time for one more question. If there isn't any, go ahead.
Hi, I'd like to circle back to transportation. You talked about transit and RTA, but I want to touch on something different, bike infrastructure and pedestrian safety. Cleveland has historically failed to provide safe bike infrastructure in the city, largely because of inaction by city officials. Other cities have prioritized bike lanes and multimodal transportation. Pittsburgh's doing it, New York City is doing it, Chicago's doing it, Seattle's doing it. Do you support Vision Zero? What will you do to ensure we have safer streets for everyone?
Absolutely. It's a shame that Councilman McCormick nearly had to sue this administration for not executing these ordinances on the books. Too many of our residents are dying because our streets aren't safe. We don't have speed bumps in certain parts of our community. And I'm going to make sure that we prioritize people over cars, finally, in the city of Cleveland. And the Vision Zero framework is a good step in the right direction, but it's going to take a mayor and a cabinet that can actually execute the books on the law, right? That's critical moving forward in our city to protect all of our residents.
Kevin, talk about bike priorities.
So the answer to your question is yes. Vision Zero was born in the council. My former colleague, Matt Zone, was really the champion of it for council. I worked with him hand in hand, but let him kind of take it because he had the bandwidth to move this forward. And I became his replacement when he resigned. But I absolutely support it. And you mentioned, you know, what's happening in Pittsburgh and the different cities you mentioned. So just an example of just some of the challenges. The goals of Vision Zero are absolutely achievable and will be achieved. But we did a whole streetscape pedestrian project on Pearl Road in Old Brooklyn. And I'll just take Pittsburgh for example, but the difference between Pittsburgh and Cleveland in this realm is they have their PennDOT, which is their Department of Transportation, that's very encouraging this. We have ODOT, which is terrible to deal with. When we were trying to come up with the bike lanes on Pearl Road, the very notion of collapsing Pearl Road to 2 lanes because it is a state route set off all kinds of alarms, and we spent more time battling that. But you have to understand where the fight is and where to fight it. But I think that if we look at what our main thoroughfares are, we have plenty of, you know, our roads are too wide, there's plenty of real estate to have a more bike-friendly community, but we just have to understand we're gonna have some fights with ODOT. We eventually got Pearl Road done in a way that has both north-south bike lanes, as well as Broadview Road, as well as Shaft Road. Memphis Road is still being configured because it's so thin. But I would say that the difference between Pittsburgh and Cleveland is we have a Department of Transportation that fights us, where Pittsburgh has one that helps them. But I absolutely support Vision Zero and its goals.
So it sounds like we do have candidates that appreciate biking and safety, so maybe you can't go wrong, at least on this issue. I guess it's a matter of execution. I want to thank everybody for participating, for viewing and supporting Engage Cleveland. Anytime we can hear more from the candidates. As you see today, there are some differences, and you know, both in backgrounds and in their ideas and visions. So I want to turn it over to Kelsey Ott, the Marketing and Events Manager here at Engage Cleveland, to wrap this up.
Yeah, can we just get one more round of applause for our moderator and our candidates for joining us today? Thank you both. And thank you all so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. Engage Cleveland is so proud to host such an important event, and especially during our 8th annual Young Professionals Week. So thank you again for joining us. And we appreciate the support of all of our sponsors and partners that we mentioned in our opening remarks. So thank you again for joining us. This wraps up our program, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Our mics are live, so